Hello everyone and welcome to task 4 of our SQL injection video series. In this task we're gonna learn about what SQL injection is. So we're going deep or detail into how we can exploit SQL injection vulnerabilities. So what is SQL injection? The point where in a web application using SQL, which stands for Structured Query Language, can turn into SQL injection is when user provided data gets included in SQL query. So user provides data, then it goes straight into queries without any kind of sanitization or validation. So that's what it means. What does it look like? So take the following scenario where you've come across an online blog, and each block entry has a unique ID number. The block entries may be either set to public or private depending on whether they are ready for public release. The URL for each block entry may look something like this. So let's say this is how the URL for your blog post or blog site looks like. So this is the website, and then you have a route called block, and then you have this parameter called ID that specify the block ID. So this is like a query string. So let's see. So from the URL above, you can see that the block entry selected comes from the ID parameter in the query string. Yes, so the block that you want to display comes from the ID. So let's assume you have another block, or second block maybe has an ID of 2. So changing this ID is going to display a different block, if that makes sense. So the web application needs to retrieve the article from the database and may use an SQL statement that looks something like this. So it retrieves this ID number you've specified and then try to make an SQL statement or SQL query to query information about that block from the database. Okay, so the query statement may look like this. So select every column from the block. Maybe you have a table called block where ID, so it's looking for an ID of 1 in your table, and then private is equal to 0. Maybe you have another column called private and then 0, which may mean the private, that is private is 0, so we assume that's going to be public, not confirmed, and then you limit it to 1, so you just want to retrieve the first row from this particular query. So from what you've learned in the previous tasks, you should be able to work out what this particular SQL statement means, as I've already actually described. So as mentioned at the start of this task, SQL injection is introduced when the user input is introduced into the database query. So the user puts 1 as an ID and then it passes straight into the query statement without any validation. In this instance, the ID parameter from the query string is used directly in the query statement, alright, which is not good. So let's pretend article ID 2 is still locked as private. So another article with an ID 2 which is private instead of public now. So if it's private, it may be 1 instead of 0. So it cannot be viewed on the website. We could now instead call the URL. So let's say we are trying to access the second block with an ID of 2. If we use this statement and then we add a semicolon and then dash dash, so the semicolon, we assume that all this part is going to be sent directly to the query statement. All right, so this is what is going to be sent to the database. All right, this is the query that's going to pass the database for the information. So which will then in turn produce a SQL statement. So this is the SQL statement. So what this means is that this is an end of statement from our previous task where we realized that semicolon will terminate the statement, but what we didn't actually talk about is dash dash. So if you see dash dash, it means you are commenting it's a form of comment in SQL. So it means we are ending the statement and then you are commenting out all this part of the statement. So what it means is that we want to retrieve the blog post with ID2 from the database and then ignore whatever statement comes after. So ignore whether it is private or public, we don't care. So if it was set as private, we will be able to access it because we've actually commented out that particular part of the statement. So the statement, the semicolon in the URL signifies the end of the SQL statement, and the two dashes cause everything afterwards to be treated as comments. Yeah. So by this point, you are just in fact running this kind of a query statement. All right. So all these parts is truncated. So which will return the article with ID2, whether it is set to public or not. So that wouldn't matter. So you are able to bypass that kind of a restriction. This was just one example of an SQL injection vulnerability of a type called inbound SQL injection. There are other types, like 3 other types. There are 3 types in total. So we have one inbound, which is what one of it has been demonstrated just now. We also have blind and then out of band SQL injection. So these are going to be discussed in the following tasks. So this should be the end of this task. Let's try to answer the question. What character signifies the end of an SQL statement? I think it's a semicolon. Let's see. Yeah, so we are right. And this should be the end of the task, and see you again in task 5. Thank you.